All right, well, thanks everyone. This is the last panel before drinks, so now this is going to be kind of depressing actually. So, I'm David Hernandez. I'm the partner at the law firm of Vedder Price, and I'm the chair of our business aviation and regulation group. And let me preface my comments. Anything I say is not construed as legal advice, and are my personal opinions and not the opinions of the firm. So don't shoot me an email saying Vedder Price said this, because it's just me. All right.
Ok. Boa tarde. É bom ver todos vocês. Eu sou Tobias, de TVPX. A TVPX é uma empresa fiduciária e despachante aduaneiro nos Estados Unidos.
How long do you practice that?
Vamos falar sobre tariffs, tarifas. Por favor, não faça perguntas em português, porque meu inglês é muito melhor. Trabalhando nisso. David, can you give us an overview of the new tariffs and their likely impact on business aviation?
So now you're going to go to English, huh?
Wow.
Okay. Shorter answer is it's awful. It's awful, right? That's a short answer. The reality is, remember, these are my views, not the views of the firm. The shorter answer is this could go to bad to worse if things don't get better. Probably 0.25% of the people in the room will not have jobs next year if this continues on. U.S. will be thrown into a recession, and that's just the worst case scenario. These are the tariffs that are present now. It's changing virtually every week, sometimes every day. As an attorney and an advisor in this, any imports that are subject to tariffs are toxic. They're just toxic. We don't deal with them because there's too much uncertainty. It's going to gum up the system and make deals a lot more frustrating and difficult. The bigger issue, though, I think, is the macroeconomic issues associated with tariffs generally, not just in the aviation or aerospace. What's happening behind the scenes with other areas. For example, China just today canceled 8,000 Boeing aircraft. There's zero chance that a Gulfstream is going to go into China anytime soon. And if these tariffs don't expire, when they expire on July 9th, it's unclear what the EU and other countries are going to do. Embraer aircraft just got expensive by 10%. Anytime you increase prices, it's not good. Total tariffs estimated are, according to the administration, $6 trillion. $6 trillion. That's the largest tax increase in the history of the United States in over 250 years. When you increase taxes in the largest in history, something's going to happen. So that's my positive spin.
Thanks so much. And I think we'll break for the...
Okay. So Tobias, right, get the drinks ready. On April 9th, the president announced there would be a 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs except for China. What does that change for the aviation industry?
Okay, so obviously we still have tariffs. He paused the reciprocal tariffs, so we still have the 10%, which is still a big problem. But there's a lot of confusion. So let's just talk about what's black and white. Gulfstream, Cessna, Textron product from the when it's manufactured in the U.S., there's no tariffs. If you have a Gulfstream 550 coming from Canada, no tariffs. If you have a CJ3 coming from Brazil, no tariffs. and this is when you're doing a formal import into the United States. Falcon Dassault Falcon is going to have tariffs. Pilatus, Swiss-made, you're going to have tariffs. G200, G280, I'm not sure. It's a gray area. You got to ask Gulfstream, is it U.S.? Is it Israel? I don't know if you get an answer. The gray areas, I tell people, get an opinion. Phenom 100 and 300. When they're 8 years old, they're probably U.S. made. After that, you've got to check with Embraer, and they'll tell you if it's U.S. or Brazil. The Praetor 500 and the 600, those are Brazilian. Now, on new, it's not an issue because they import it. If there's a tariff, they're going to pay it. The problem is with used aircraft. And so you've just got to be really careful. And there's a lot of people who still believe that it doesn't apply to airplanes. Well, it does. And the penalties for circumvention can be severe. So you've got to take it seriously. And, you know, sometimes there's solutions, sometimes there aren't. We are seeing people pay tariffs. I have one right now. They got a really good price on an aircraft, and they said, we want it, we're going to bring it into the U.S., we're going to pay. So that is probably, if these tariffs stay in place for a while, some people will pay the tariffs. Right. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. David, the 1979 agreement on trade in civil aircraft should take precedent over the tariffs, right?
Yeah, right, should.
How do the new tariffs apply with that agreement, and how could the tariffs change the cross-border aviation trade balance?
So that 79 agreement was an agreement across the world that basically made it possible for civil aviation to grow exponentially. It eliminated a lot of the barriers, and that's why we have such a robust aviation community, civil aviation or aerospace community throughout the world. What's happening now is, because it is indeed agreement, the Trump administration is taking a position that emergency actions are necessary because of fentanyl crossing the border, because of illegal immigration, allows the administration to overrule the agreement, the international agreement. I mean, they're litigating it. Various people are litigating it. We'll see how that plays out. The administration has 7 Supreme Court justices on their side, so no one's really optimistic at this point, but we don't know. So we got a cheat sheet here. We're asking each other questions here. Tobias, what are the areas of confusion and misinformation you're hearing from the industry?
Okay, well, I alluded to some of the confusion and misinformation because people just think, oh, we're importing an airplane from China, so there's tariffs. And again, if you're bringing a Gulfstream from China, there's no tariffs. There is confusion, as I alluded to, over things like the Phenom 100 and the 300. Some were made here, the older ones, and some are, the newer ones, obviously made in the United States. So you've got to consult with Embraer on those. A lot of people think, there's still people who say, well, you don't. We talked to someone, recently. We can do a transaction in the United States. It has nothing to do with the United States, even though we're going to go there and close and then and then export the plane. If you're doing business in the United States, in the customs territory of the United States, you have to respect the trade regulations. You need to import, you need to export. It's a formal process. It's carefully controlled and coordinated, and you need to plan in advance.
Right, and I'll just add on to that. If you don't do it correctly, you're subject to civil and criminal prosecution. And I think the administration would certainly enforce the people trying to circumvent U.S. law when it comes to these tariffs.
David, how could existing and new purchase and sale agreements be impacted?
So I think, and we're doing this now with our clients, it's absolutely has to spell out who's responsible for the tariffs, what happens when the tariffs do kick in, if you already got an existing agreement, how to deal with it, how to address it. I mean, it's, an agreement is an agreement, a negotiation between two parties. So figure out who pays what and when, and understand what are the ramifications and how are the changing circumstances for, folks that do these agreements. Is this force majeure? Is this an act of God? Is taxes something that is something you can negotiate out of? What are your liquidated damages? Is it cheaper to walk away than get hit with a 5%, or excuse me, a 25% tariff? All of these things have to be spelled out in detail. And it's very important to talk with customs brokers, as Tobias said, as soon as you get involved in the process. Because when a plane lands in Bangor, Maine, or Windsor Locks, or Galveston, that's not the time to figure out, do I have a tariff exposure here? Because then it's too late. And again, if you try to bring a plane in incorrectly, you're not going to get a get out of jail free card. The government can go after you.
David, are you hearing from people, and if so, how are you advising when they say, we entered into an agreement 2 years ago, our airplane is being delivered soon, and it's subject to tariffs?
Right. It's a good question. I just dealt with that. The first thing I ask is, let me see the agreement. What are the liquidated damages? How much does it cost to walk away? Is it financed? If this is financed, you got progress payments. Chances are, if it's financed, the bank's already said, we're not paying these progress payments, or we're not paying the tariff. You have to read the agreement, read the liquidated damages, see if tariffs are mentioned anywhere. Chances are they're not. I've looked at all the manufacturers. They don't even mention tariffs in any of this stuff. And understand what the exposure is, because this is something that you need to be playing chess, not checkers. You need to think 5 steps ahead, because when the tariffs do hit, you got to have answers for everything. What about this? Here's the answer. What about this? Here's the answer. What about this? Here's the answer. And in a perfect scenario, if you're going to get the tariffs, try to delay. If you can't delay out of the tariffs, because that did happen. We're getting calls on March 5th. I said, heck, I don't know. Delay and let's see what happens. And the tariff law changed. And so you bring the aircraft in a couple days later. Now, before July 9th, all the tariffs go up in Europe to back up to 20%. Some people are going to eat the tariffs, but you've got to, all these agreements have to be crystal clear, because you just don't know. And yeah, tariffs are terrifying when it comes to, do you want to pay an extra 10%? If you're a high net worth individual with more money than common sense, I shouldn't say, if you have a lot of money, then sure, you're going to pay the tariffs, because you really don't care that much. But if you're struggling, it could be problematic. And, that's the takeaway. I'm up. You're up. All right. Oh, here's one. Tobias, when do you recommend that someone hires a customs broker to get involved in the process?
Sure. So, we get a lot of calls from people saying, we're here, or we're coming tomorrow. And it's a very short fuse transaction where we have to import an airplane very quickly or export an airplane very quickly. But more often than not, we get, a week or two notice. And, if it's an aircraft that is, not subject to tariffs, it's fairly routine, they give us power of attorney, we get them a customs bond, we get all the information, we make the entry. If an import is done right or an export is done right, it should be a non-event when you cross the border. Now, with aircraft that are a gray area or subject to tariffs, I think people need to do more advanced planning. If they have scheduled maintenance now, and if it's an aircraft that is subject to tariffs, maybe you want to do a temporary importation bond import. But you have to be very careful with those types of imports because the penalties, if you don't do it right, are severe. But you could potentially bring a Falcon to the U.S. for maintenance under a temporary importation bond, and then export the aircraft and not be subject to tariffs. And in that situation, you definitely want to plan in advance, especially if you had scheduled maintenance and you know when you're going far in advance. The other thing is that we have to get a customs bond for the importer of record. And in a duty-free environment, it's very easy to get a bond. It's a $50,000 bond. The insurance premium is $200 US. I can have one in about an hour. But if it's an aircraft subject to tariffs, the liability to U.S. Customs it could be hundreds of thousands, it could be millions of dollars. And the insurance company is going to underwrite that bond a little bit differently. They're going to want to see financials from the importer of record. They might want collateral. So those are going to take longer to get, and you have to plan in advance. But to answer your question, the more time that someone gives us, the better. And if we're if they call us first and we see a problem, we can, say, look, you've got an issue here you need to think about. We don't provide legal advice, and refer them to a customs attorney that can help them navigate the difficult issues that they might be facing. So, as much in advance as possible, but we do get plenty that are last minute. And unfortunately, there are people who forget to import, and the airplane is already in the U.S., and then you have to fix that with a disclosure process, and that takes outside counsel as well.
One related question to that: how do you fix it? If you're rushed, or you hear somebody that rushed through an import and just did something wrong, how do you fix it?
Well, what they did wrong was they didn't import it, and they didn't realize it. So what we do is they'll retain an attorney. The attorney will make a disclosure. Now the old method was fly the airplane out and fly the airplane back, but that's not always practical. The airplane might be deregistered. The airplane may not be able to fly, and so the alternative is to make a disclosure. You write a letter to U.S. Customs. We made a mistake. We brought the airplane in for maintenance. We decided to sell it. We forgot to import it. Whatever the story is, you tell them the facts and the truth. And then at the same time, we, as the customs broker, will coordinate with the attorney. We'll get them the bond. We'll get the power of attorney. We'll make the filing. And then we wait for almost a resolution letter from U.S. Customs saying, okay, you're forgiven, don't do it again. And the big question that comes up is, well, can we close? And it's really a business decision that the parties need to get comfortable with, but once the importer admits they made a mistake, they're the party that's going to be on the hook for the problem if there is a fine or a penalty. And so the parties, and sometimes they will close and sometimes they won't close. David, how could existing and new service repair contracts be impacted? Also, what are some best practices that should be included in contracts going forward? So
this is a bit unique, and you see this quite a bit, cross-border transactions between Mexico and Canada, and I'm experiencing it now with, I think everything's got to be spelled out. And this is unique because you have to talk to the MRO and see where the content is coming from and see if it's from one of these, one of these impacted by some of these other type of significant tariffs, aluminum, copper, steel, from China. You have to ask yourself, because all of those are impacted on the improvements of the aircraft. Because when you put a finished product or take a finished product across the border and improve it, they're going to ask what's the cost of the improvements. And so you have to talk to the MRO and see, what's the tariff impact on this. Similarly, if you're caught between these areas of importation and a tariff hit, I got a call from a broker that said, I shouldn't laugh. So they sent Rolls-Royce engines to Canada to be repaired, not covered under USMCA, and they landed, and then tariffs hit, and it's being repaired right now. And I got a call saying, well, these are subject to 20% tariffs. I got to import these engines? I didn't even knew about importing. I didn't care about it before. And so they're stuck in Canada. He's not going to bring them back until this settles. And fortunately, the MRO says, look, we'll give you some leeway here, but we're not going to hold these forever, and we're going to start charging you storage fees. And if you don't pick them up, we're going to seize them and sell them. So all of these have to be spelled out now. If you've got planes going into an MRO or crossing borders, you have to know exactly what's impacted by tariffs. Talk to Tobias's folks, ask what the foreign content is, and ultimately this increases the cost of all these transactions. And typically if you ask an MRO, what's the foreign content? They're like, I don't know. I need to know that because I'm going to get asked that when we bring it back. And so all of these things you have to ask. And this isn't stuff attorneys do. This is stuff that customs brokers do, and the MROs, and the manufacturers. And you've got to get these things called certificate of origins or exemptions, because the shining, the bright spot here is that if it's coming into the U.S., any U.S. content is deducted from the tariff, which is actually pretty good. It's crazy. It really is. I mean, one other thing I think, just go back here to this previous slide. You have to be concerned about what happens with respect to abrupt changes. For example, when Colombia said they wouldn't take immigration flights, they were going to get hit with a 25% tariff. If someone gets caught buying Venezuelan oil, they may get hit with a 25% tariff. So all of these things are relevant and important, and you have to understand, if my engine or aircraft is in a different country and these tariffs kick in for whatever reason, you have to be prepared for that. And how do you prepare for the unknown? You just think a lot. You got to figure out how to do it and do a lot of what ifs and have it in the agreements. And if nothing else, call it force majeure. So, here's a good one. Same type of subject. Tobias, can I temporarily import an aircraft in the U.S. for a pre-buy and sell it?
Yeah, so I mentioned this earlier. So what people think is, okay, I can bring it in temporarily, do a pre-buy. The problem with the temporary importation bond regime in the U.S. is that you're not allowed to sell goods in the U.S. on a TIB. Now, in a duty-free environment, if someone did that accidentally, and there are reasons why people might make that mistake and use a TIB. Well, you could cancel the TIB, pay 2 times the duty, which in a duty-free environment was only $600 US, so $1,200, and then sell the aircraft. But if it's an aircraft subject to tariffs, 2 times the duty is too much money. I mean, it could be, if your tariff is $1 million, you could be paying $2 million in penalties if you come in under a TIB and then you try to sell the aircraft. Now, what you might be able to do, and if this is something that you're considering, I think you strongly urge you to get an opinion. If you have, let's say, a buyer in Europe or Mexico or wherever, and you bring an aircraft into the U.S. that's subject to tariffs, you might be able to do a temporary importation bond, do the pre-buy, export the aircraft, because that's one of the requirements of a TIB. The merchandise, the goods need to be exported from the U.S. within 1 year, which you should be able to meet. Now, you can get extensions if you have to, and then sell it after the export. That might be something that you can do if you want to do your pre-buy in the U.S., but your buyer is not necessarily in the U.S. Otherwise, you've got to come up with other solutions. One of the problems is the pre-buy in the U.S. on an aircraft that's, got a tariff associated. You might find that you want to do the pre-buy here. And I don't know how practical it is to close here, but then it becomes, the buyer's issue to import the aircraft when they go to the U.S., when they have certainty they're going to buy that aircraft. Because if you say, okay, we'll pay the tariff, we're going to import it into the U.S. and go to the pre-buy, well, what happens if they reject the plane? You don't get the tariff back. So I think the logistics of closings and contracting and pre-buys, if these tariffs stay in place, are going to change for those aircraft that are impacted. Obviously, for the ones that aren't, it's business as usual.
Right, and I mean, not good. So in any event, Al's reminding me it's drink time. So let's all go get some drinks, I think.
Thanks very much.
Does anybody have questions?
Yeah.
I think you guys will be in the cocktail reception.
Yes.
Taking any questions.
I'm happy to.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. It's been a really exciting day up until the last session.
It wasn't that bad.
Cheery.
Truth. Speak the truth.
Thank you. And thanks very much to the cocktails downstairs. Thank you, David and Tobias. Thank you.
Obrigado.
Obrigado.